My son-in-law changed the locks while I was in Tennessee visiting my old friend. My daughter called it a family decision. 3 weeks later, they made 89 calls I never answered, drove 6 hours to find me, and stood on a stranger's porch begging me not to do what I'd already done. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. The drive back from Nashville felt longer than usual. 12 days at my college friend's place had done me good real sleep, real conversation, real meals where nobody sighed when I walked into the kitchen. I had the windows down despite the October chill because the air in Tennessee smelled like wood smoke and fallen leaves, and I wanted to hold on to that as long as I could. I'd been gone longer than planned. My friend's wife had just recovered from knee surgery, and they needed an extra pair of hands around the house. I didn't mind. Helping felt good. Helping felt like something I used to do without being reminded how lucky I was to still have a place to sleep. I noticed it before I even turned off the engine. 3 cardboard boxes stacked on the porch steps, a black garbage bag leaning against the railing. My old toolbox sitting in the mulch beside the hydrangeas my late wife had planted the spring before she got sick. I sat in the driveway for a full minute with the engine running. The boxes had my name on them in my daughter's handwriting. Careful! Looping letters that she'd used on birthday cards and grocery lists for 30 years. The same handwriting that had signed the thank you note she sent me 4 years ago when I wrote her a check for $60,000. I climbed out slowly. My right knee had been bothering me since Memphis, and the cold made it worse. I walked to the porch and lifted the lid on the first box. My bathroom things. Razor, shaving cream, the prescription bottles lined up like soldiers. My reading glasses were wrapped in a kitchen towel. Someone had been thorough, at least. Not gentle, but thorough. The second box held clothes, folded badly. My winter flannel shirts balled together with my good dress pants. A pair of shoes wedged in at an angle, creasing the leather. The third box was books, and the framed photograph from my nightstand me and my wife on our 30th anniversary, taken at a restaurant in Charleston we'd saved up to visit. The glass wasn't broken, but it was facing down. I stood there in the cold with my hand resting on that box, not moving, just breathing. Then I walked to the front door and put my key in the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, slower this time, applying pressure the way you do when a lock is stiff. Nothing. I pulled the key out and looked at it. Same key I'd been using for 3 years. The lock was different. Brand new, shiny brass, no scratches at all. I called my daughter. 4 rings, then voicemail. I called my son-in-law. Same. I texted my daughter, "I'm in the driveway. My key doesn't work. Call me." I sat on the porch steps next to my own boxes and waited. The neighborhood was quiet the way suburbs go quiet on a Tuesday afternoon. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A school bus passed without stopping. The house next door had a fall wreath on the door, and a carved pumpkin on the porch. Normal life happening in every direction except mine. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter. "We'll be home by 6. Stay there." Not "Dad. I'm so sorry. There must be a misunderstanding." Not "Are you okay?" Just stay there, like I was a delivery that needed a signature. I stayed. I didn't have anywhere else to go. They pulled in together at 6:15. My son-in-law drove. He always drove when something uncomfortable was happening. It gave him an exit strategy, something to do with his hands. My daughter got out first, and the look on her face wasn't guilt. It wasn't even discomfort. It was the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment and decided in advance not to feel anything she didn't choose to feel. "Dad." She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. What happened to my key? I kept my voice even. 38 years of electrical contracting had taught me that you assess the situation before you react. You don't grab a live wire in the dark. My son-in-law came around the car and stood slightly behind her, hands in his jacket pockets. He looked at the mailbox. "We've been talking about this for a while," my daughter said. "We think it's time for you to have your own space, your own independence." "My own independence," I repeated. "You'd be happier somewhere designed for people your age. A senior community, or maybe a smaller apartment closer to the golf course. You've been talking about playing more golf." I mentioned golf once, in July. She pressed on. "This house is for our family, Dad. Marcus and I need our privacy. The kids are getting older. They need their rooms. And honestly, having another adult in the house it's been a lot." I looked at my son-in-law. He was still studying the mailbox. Marcus. He glanced up. It's just time, he said. That's all. Just time. Like I was a subscription they'd decided not to renew. 3 years earlier, they'd called me on a Sunday afternoon, both of them on the phone together, voices overlapping with excitement. They'd found a house, 4 bedrooms, good school district, big backyard for the grandchildren. The only problem was the price. They were $60,000 short of the down payment, and the bank wouldn't go any higher on their pre-approval. Dad, we were thinking, my daughter had said, and I could hear her trying to sound casual. If you sold your place in Greenville and moved in with us, we could use the equity toward the down payment. You'd have your own room, your own bathroom. It would be like the family all together again. My house in Greenville wasn't worth a fortune. I'd bought it in 1991, paid it off over 22 years, kept it up myself because that's what a contractor does. When I sold it, I cleared $187,000. I gave them $60,000 for the down payment and kept the rest in savings. I moved into their spare room with my clothes, my tools, and the photograph from the nightstand. My name went on the deed, not as a gesture, not as a formality because the bank required it. With my daughter and son-in-law's debt-to-income ratio, they couldn't qualify without a co-borrower with clean credit and documented assets. The mortgage officer had been very clear about that. All 3 of us signed. I thought about that paperwork now. Standing on the porch, they wanted me to leave. You want me to go, I said. We want you to have your own life, my daughter said carefully. Where am I supposed to go tonight? She reached into her jacket pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper, a printout, an extended stay motel on Route 9, highlighted in yellow marker with a nightly rate written in the margin. Someone had done their research. We can help with the first week, she said, while you get settled. I picked up the photograph from the 3rd box. I tucked it under my arm. Then I picked up the toolbox from the mulch. My daughter watched me without speaking. My son-in-law watched the mailbox. I'll be in touch, I said. I loaded my boxes into my truck. All 3 of them, plus the garbage bag, plus the toolbox. I didn't ask for help and none was offered. I started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and drove until the house was out of my mirrors. The extended stay motel on Route 9 had a weekly rate and a coffee machine in the lobby that worked about half the time. My room was on the ground floor facing the parking lot, fluorescent light, thin walls, a heating unit that clicked all night. I sat on the edge of the bed with my hands on my knees and the photograph of my wife on the dresser, and I allowed myself exactly 1 hour to feel everything I was feeling. Then I opened my folder. I keep a folder. My wife called it my worry drawer. Every important document, every contract, every deed and insurance policy, organized by date and kept in a fireproof box in my truck. The habit came from the trade. In contracting, the paperwork is the protection. Handshakes don't hold up in court. I found the deed in 11 seconds. My name was on it, not as a cosigner on the mortgage that was a separate document, but on the deed itself, the actual title to the property. When the attorney had walked us through the closing, she'd explained that as a co-borrower contributing to the down payment, I had the right to be listed as a co-owner. My daughter had smiled and squeezed my arm. My son-in-law had shaken my hand. Everyone had been very warm. I owned a 40% interest in that house. I sat with that fact for a long time. The heating unit clicked. A car pulled into the parking lot and left again. Somewhere down the hall, a television was playing a game show, the host's voice rising and falling with artificial enthusiasm. They had thrown me out of a house I partially owned. I found an attorney the next morning. His name was Gerald Park, and his office was above a dry cleaner 2 miles from the motel. He was in his early 50s, calm and precise, the kind of man who chose his words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. I spread my documents across his desk and explained the situation without embellishment. He read everything twice, made a few notes, then set his pen down. "Mister," he started, "just tell me what I have," I said. He nodded. "You have a 40% ownership interest in the property, clearly documented on the deed. That interest was not transferred, released, or altered at any point. Legally, your daughter and son-in-law cannot sell, refinance, or make major decisions about that property without your consent, and you cannot be excluded from a property you legally own. Changing the locks on a co-owner is, frankly, an unusual decision on their part. They didn't know I knew." He looked at me for a moment. "What would you like to do?" I thought about my wife. I thought about the Sunday afternoon phone call, both of them on the line, voices full of excitement. I thought about 3 years of eating breakfast alone because my son-in-law worked from home and needed quiet in the mornings. I thought about the holidays when my daughter's in-laws visited, and I was asked, twice, if I wouldn't mind taking my meals upstairs. What are my options? I asked. Gerald Park was thorough. He explained partition actions, a legal process that forces the sale of jointly owned property when co-owners can't agree. He explained buyout negotiations. He explained that I could demand to be restored to the property immediately, since no co-owner can legally be locked out. He explained that if they had refinanced without my knowledge, that would create additional legal issues. There's also the matter of the $60,000 down payment, he said, reviewing the transfer records. That's documented as your contribution. A court would likely consider that in any partition proceeding. I left his office 2 hours later with a retainer paid, a referral to a real estate attorney who handled partition sales, and the business card of a realtor named Patricia Odom, who Gerald said was the best in the county at moving property quickly. I called Patricia from the motel parking lot. She picked up on the second ring. I explained that I was a co-owner of a residential property and wanted to understand my options regarding a sale. She asked me a few professional questions, confirmed the address in the county records, and said she could meet me the next morning. Her voice had the focused energy of someone who understood that motivated sellers didn't need to be warmed up. "What kind of timeline are we discussing?" she asked. "As fast as legally possible," I said. "The other occupants are aware there's a dispute, but they don't know the extent of my legal position yet." A brief pause. "I'll pull the comps tonight and have numbers ready for tomorrow." The motel coffee was terrible, but I slept better than I had in 6 months. Patricia Odom turned out to be a compact woman in her late 40s with a silver streak in her hair and a no-nonsense approach to property values. She had the comps laid out on her laptop when I sat down across from her at the coffee shop she'd chosen. Comparable sales, days on market, projected list price. The house, based on current market conditions and recent renovations, would likely sell in the low $400,000 range. My 40% interest, after mortgage payoff, would net somewhere between $95,000 and $115,000, depending on final sale price and closing costs. "Has the property been well maintained?" she asked. "I maintained it myself. I'm a retired electrician and general contractor. I did the deck, the bathroom remodel, the fence. All permitted, all up to code." She made a note. "That'll help. Buyers in that neighborhood care about condition." She looked up. "I need to be clear with you, if the other owners don't cooperate with showings, the process gets more complicated. A partition sale through the courts is slower and messier." "Let me handle the first conversation," I said. "Give me a week." I didn't call my daughter right away. I spent the next 4 days handling other logistics, finding a small rental apartment in a complex I'd noticed on my way to Gerald's office. Month to month, second floor, clean and well lit with a view of a small pond. I put down a deposit. I transferred my mail. I opened a new checking account at a different bank. I also turned off my phone. Not permanently. I bought a second prepaid phone for calls I wanted to make, and I left my regular phone off except for scheduled windows. I wanted to choose when I was reachable, not the other way around. On the 5th day, I turned on my regular phone. 41 missed calls, 17 voicemails, 32 text messages. The first few were from my daughter, confident and slightly impatient. "Dad, we need to talk. Call me back." Then my son-in-law, more clipped. "We need to work out the logistics. There are papers you need to sign." Papers. They wanted me to sign something. I could guess what a quitclaim deed, releasing my ownership interest. Gerald had warned me this might happen. As the days progressed, the tone changed. My daughter's messages shifted from impatient to confused to worried. "Dad, where are you? Nobody knows where you are." My son-in-law around day 3, trying a different approach. "I know we didn't handle things perfectly. Let's talk like adults." By day 5, there was a voicemail from my daughter that I listened to twice, not because it moved me, but because of a particular sentence in the middle. "We went to the county records office and saw the deed. We understand now that you have an interest in the property. We think there's been a miscommunication, and we'd like to resolve this together." Her voice was steady, but her breathing wasn't. She'd found a lawyer, or someone had found one for them, and they now understood exactly what I was holding. I called Patricia Odom. "I'm ready to move forward," I said. "What do you need from me?" She needed my co-owner authorization in writing, which Gerald had already prepared, and access to the property for photographs. I authorized the photography and provided contact information for Gerald to coordinate legally with any attorney my daughter and son-in-law retained. As the co-owner, I had every right to list my interest and pursue a sale. The cleanest path was a full sale of the property with proceeds split per ownership percentage, but if they wanted to buy me out at fair market value, I was open to that conversation as well. I let Gerald manage those conversations. I had places to be. A man I'd worked with for 15 years ran a small construction company in Savannah, Georgia. Residential renovations, older homes, the kind of careful work that required someone who understood original materials and period techniques. He'd been asking me to consult for 2 years. I'd always said I was too settled to travel. I called him that afternoon. "How soon can you use me?" I asked. "Last week," he said immediately. "Can you be here by Monday?" I could. Savannah in October is a different world from a suburban motel on Route 9. Spanish moss and brick sidewalks and the smell of salt coming in off the river. My colleague set me up in a furnished apartment near the historic district, part of a renovation project he was managing. The work was exactly what I needed. Real problems with real solutions. A building that responded honestly to experience and attention. No politics. No sighing when I walked in the room. I left my regular phone in the apartment most days and took only the prepaid. Gerald sent updates by email. My daughter's attorney had contacted him. They wanted a buyout, not a partition sale. The offer came in low, well below what 40% of the projected sale price would yield. Gerald sent a counteroffer. They came up, he countered again. This is how it works when people finally understand that the paperwork means exactly what it says. Meanwhile, Patricia Odom had photographed the property and created a listing. I had authorized her to list publicly if the buyout negotiation didn't resolve within 14 days. That deadline was Gerald's idea. It focused everyone. The missed calls continued. 89 total across both phones by the end of the second week. My daughter had apparently contacted my old colleagues, my neighbor from Greenville, and my wife's sister in Asheville. My wife's sister texted me on the prepaid I'd given her that number years ago for emergencies. "Your daughter is looking for you. She seems scared. I told her I hadn't heard from you. Is everything okay?" I called her back. "I'm fine," I told her. "I'm working in Savannah. Tell her I'm fine if you want to, but tell her the process is already in motion." My wife's sister was quiet for a moment. She'd known us for 40 years, watched my daughter grow up, stood at my wife's graveside. "Are you going to let them fix it?" she asked. "They can fix the buyout price," I said. "Gerald is handling it." She accepted that without pushing. She'd always been a practical woman. The resolution came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks and 2 days after I'd driven away from that porch with my boxes in the truck. Gerald called me on the prepaid while I was eating breakfast at a place near the waterfront that made biscuits the way biscuits are supposed to be made. "They've accepted the revised offer," he said. "Full buyout, $108,500, closing costs split. Wire transfer within 10 business days. We'll need you here to sign." I drove back on a Friday. Gerald's office was in the same building above the dry cleaner. The signing took 40 minutes. The closing documents were thorough and final. When I walked out, I owned no percentage of that house anymore, and I had $108,500 arriving in my account in 9 business days. My daughter and son-in-law were standing in the parking lot. I hadn't known they'd be there. Gerald hadn't mentioned it. They must have found out from their own attorney. My daughter was wearing a gray coat I didn't recognize, and she looked like she'd lost 10 pounds in a month. My son-in-law was standing with his arms crossed and his eyes on the pavement, which was, I noticed, exactly what he'd been doing the last time I'd seen him. Dad. My daughter's voice was different than it had been on the porch. The practiced calm was gone. I stopped walking. "We need to talk," she said. "Please, we made a terrible mistake, and we know that now. We want to make this right." I looked at her for a long moment. She was my daughter. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's stubbornness and, apparently, her mother's eventual ability to know when she'd done something wrong. That last part had taken longer to appear than I would have liked. "The conversation you want to have," I said, "is about whether I'll come back." She nodded. "I'm not coming back to that arrangement. I want to be clear about that." My son-in-law looked up briefly and then backed down. "That's not what I mean," she said quickly. "Not that. Just, can we have dinner? Can we talk? We've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. The kids have been asking about you. The grandchildren. I'd been trying not to think about them. I'll have dinner, I said. Not tonight. Next weekend. Somewhere neutral. She nodded again, and something in her shoulders came down about 2 inches. Okay, yes, whatever you want. I walked to my truck. I didn't look back. I had a drive to make and a project in Savannah waiting for me, and the Saturday biscuits at the waterfront place were better than anything I'd had access to in 3 years of living in someone else's house. The money cleared on a Thursday. $108,500, less Gerald's fees, landing in an account that had only my name on it. I sat with that number for a while. It represented the down payment I'd given, plus 3 years of co-ownership through a rising market, plus the work I'd done on the property with my own hands. Fair. Not generous, but fair. I called my colleague in Savannah and told him I could commit through the spring. He sounded like I'd told him his team won the championship. We worked out the terms over the phone in about 10 minutes. Real conversation between two people who both understood the value of what was being exchanged. That evening, I walked to the waterfront and sat on a bench for a long time, watching the river. The light on the water had that low October quality that makes everything look like it belongs in a painting. A couple walked by with a dog. An older man sat on the next bench eating a sandwich and reading a paperback with obvious satisfaction. I thought about what my wife would say if she could see the last 3 years. She would have seen the pattern long before I did. She always saw things clearly, even things she didn't want to see. She would have been gentler about it than I was, probably. She would have had the hard conversation earlier. But she also would have understood that there comes a point when a conversation isn't enough, when the only thing that communicates consequence is consequence itself. I thought about the dinner next weekend. My daughter and I had real things to rebuild, if she was willing to do the work of rebuilding honestly. My son-in-law and I had less, but that could be addressed over time. The grandchildren had done nothing wrong and deserved a grandfather who showed up. None of that required me to return to an arrangement where I was useful until I wasn't. None of that required me to pretend the last 3 years had been something other than what they were. I pulled out my phone, the regular one, which I'd started carrying again, and typed a text to my daughter. Saturday works for dinner. You choose the restaurant. Bring the kids. She responded in under a minute. We'll be there. Thank you, Dad. I put the phone in my pocket and watched the river until the light was gone. Here's the thing nobody talks about when they tell these stories. The lesson wasn't that I had leverage. The lesson was that I'd given everything I had without ever asking what the terms were. I sold my home, contributed my savings, put my name on a deed, and assumed that love was the contract. It isn't. Love is built on top of contracts, but it isn't the contract itself. My wife knew that. She used to say that the kindest thing you can do for people is be honest about what you need before things get complicated. She was right. She usually was. If you're someone who's helping your family financially, whether that's a down payment, a cosign, moving in to help out, get it in writing, not because you don't trust them, because you do, and you want to make sure it stays that way. A clear agreement is an act of love, not suspicion. It protects everyone, including the people you're helping. If this story meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment and tell me what time it is where you're watching, and whether you've ever been in a situation like this. I read every single one. To watch the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for being here.